when other people compliment you.
Isn't it good?
So what I want you to start doing is,
pause down.
I want you to start working on your going from drag line to no leash.
Good boy.
All right. So you're going to start, you can use this with your leave it. You can use this when you start combining your go get it with your come get it from me kind of stuff, right? Yeah. So going from your drag line to off lead, okay, is a process. And a lot of people really, because you're so optimistic, you're so happy about it, and sometimes you're just like, oh, he's doing so well. Sometimes we don't pay attention to, how the dog's feeling. Are they really paying attention? Like, there's all sorts of factors that influence the way you do things. Sometimes I still make mistakes when I'm driving, and I've been driving for years, right? And it's the same for the dog. Just because they've been doing well doesn't mean they're not going to make mistakes, especially people who bench press. So when we do our markers, right? So generally with markers, anything where you have more control over the environment, right? Usually what I do is I do the 5-7 day test. Okay. So you start off with 5 days. Okay. So you start the count and then you practice. If in none of that you had to help him or block him, then you can move on to the 7 days. If you go through the 7 days and you never had to help him or block him, but you've worked on multiple pictures, so your generalization, you've worked on multiple temptations, you've even done a little bit of temptation stacking, meaning you've done a couple of temptations in a row, you've been in the house, outside the house, that sort of stuff, okay? So this is like really, really notching it in. Then you can take the lead off.
Okay.
But usually, if you go through day 1, day 2, day 3, I had to help him. You restart the count until he goes through 5 days of number 1, no corrections, meaning like you're not helping him, you're not blocking him, you're not like you don't have to look at him and tell him again. Like he's very clear, and it's been with multiple people, multiple situations, trigger stacking, all this sort of stuff, right? And you'll learn the limits of your dog. So really super difficult things you do rare, like once in a blue moon, right? When he's in a good mood, that's what you do. Less is more. When it's easy stuff, sure, And then once you've gone and doing that, then you start to vary the frequency of just practicing it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So after you've done 5 days, no problems, never had to correct him, never had to use your drag line. Like you go through 5 days of, I didn't even need the drag line, right? Then you go to 7 days and you repeat. Okay. If it was something like a recall, depending on the dog, if I had something like a recall, a drop in public, anything where it's out in public and like the stakes are a little higher if the dog's not successful, I will then usually do the 10-15 day
Okay.
test.
It's a long time, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Especially with your recalls, because you really want to make sure, because what happens is usually the dogs do great until they don't, and then we're shocked, and then we're like, what do we do? So I'm like, well, let's have that insurance policy, and it becomes such a habit. Will I always trust my dog to do it off leash? Not particularly,
No.
unless I do have a way to help. So often than not, you'll find Derry will have his little leash attached. Ziva usually has a leash. At the moment, she's got her remote collar, so I can help her with a tactile feedback where she goes, oh yeah, right. So I can still help her. Do I need it? Probably not, but it's going to be that 1% that I wasn't prepared, or I wasn't paying attention, or something, the unexpected that you really cannot prepare for, like a tsunami or a meteorite, or, I don't know, an airplane falls out the sky. Like, who practices that in their training sessions? Can you imagine? It's like, okay, guys, today we're practicing airplanes falling out the sky.
Great.
So it really becomes this learned and conditioned response. And that's what they do in the military and all these sorts of things. They constantly practice it when you're doing it. You're like, yeah, cool.
Drill it in.
Drill. That's why basic stuff. So
if you're doing a recall in the park, what is a reasonable length that you would go to practice?
Are you talking about the leash, or are you talking about how far away the dog is?
How far away the dog is.
Okay. First off, if it's with a remote collar.
No. It's like me and Halo. It's no remote collar.
Second, well, the thing is if you've gone through this process or not. Okay, so if you've never done that with a long line, I can't answer that. Because because you have to remember, like with your recall, we have these bubbles. Okay, so if you're over here, right, then he goes, well, within this perimeter, you know, oh, you can still get me, you know, maybe. And then there'll be a distance where they're like, I know you can't get me. But and then there's a bigger one. Yeah. Where they're like, huh.
Yeah, no chance.
Yeah. But it also consists of, you might have, when the dog's with you, right, you have certain levels where the furthest away a dog will go and then become uncomfortable when you move. So if you start moving away and increasing that distance and start coming to you, I call that your social distance. Okay. For some dogs, it doesn't matter. You know, you walk away, they go, yeah, no, right, I'll find you. You know, they're like crackers.
But no, Halo's not like that. There is a point where I'll walk too far, he'll come. Yes, he comes.
And that's usually to do with dogs that are not as independent, because they rely on that for security. It's normal, right? Even in the wild, like lions tend to want to stick together. The owner, like even leopards, like they want to kind of, you know, they're usually solitary creatures. So, but they're up in the air. It's very, very different where you can come up as well. And then where lions, hyenas, wild dogs, crocodiles, even hippos, elephants. I mean, all these animals are pretty powerful, but even they understand that numbers are pretty, you know, a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
So dogs.
So the reason I'm asking is that if I'm sitting down with Halo and I chuck the ball and it goes out to, I don't know, 10 metres, let's say, he'll bring it back to me every time. Every time. Unless it's too hot and he'll go to the shade.
Yes.
And he'll sit in the shade for, you know, like a minute, and then he'll bring it to me.
Sure.
So
that makes sense, cooling down.
Yeah, it's cooling down, just cooling down. So if I'm standing up though and throw the ball, it's a bit different. So sometimes, does he do the same thing? So occasionally he'll go off and have a sniff and then come back to me. I mean, he does always come back to me with the ball. Like he always comes back with the ball and drops it at my feet.
Sure.
So would you consider that good recall? Is that good recall? Or do you want him just to come straight back?
I mean, recall is I called you and you're coming. Like if I'm throwing a ball, I don't particularly care.
Okay.
So if I decide that we're playing fetch and the dog starts saying, oh, that's interesting. And then, all right, let's, you know, time out. All right, and then come back. Okay. That's not really a recall. Okay. A recall is the dog's doing whatever he's doing, and then I'm like, come, or here. And the dog's like, yes, ma'am, and comes over. Or it could be the dog's chasing like Ziva will chase a ball, and I'll go come, and she'll go right back.
You know when we were at the beach with Liv and Diesel, and he pissed off literally all the way down the beach?
Diesel?
Yeah. If Liv called his name, which is supposed to be recall, he would not do it.
No. Okay. So Halo will come back though. So we've been down the beach and called him, and he does come back.
Sure.
So okay. So
most of the time.
It's not all the time. No, it's not 100% of the time. But I haven't actually worked on that, and there's a ton of distractions of other dogs and stuff down there.
Sure, but if you met Zeus, you'd understand.
Yeah.
Zeus will be 100 meters.
And you come back.
No.
Oh.
He won't come back.
Right. Okay. So that's Diesel.
Yeah. Well,
come back.
Zeus will be 20 meters away from him. Won't come back. He will be 5 meters away from him. He still won't come back until I trained him, and he went, oh. So there's criteria with a recall, and there's and criteria. What I mean by that is, it's not just the recalls. Most obedience commands. So obedience, what we call training problems, is things we want from the dog that is not natural. Okay, dogs don't, like, no animal really sits for their food.
Yeah.
But our dogs do.
Yeah.
They don't really get called. You know, they get signals and then they decide what they want to do. But there's no real recall like we would have. So you have, and this is what I'm saying to a lot of people. So you've got your temptation proofing, you've got your generalization. But then there's criteria that you can, at some point in time, correct a dog for. So correct could be helping them.
Yep.
Or you can actually discipline them. Like,
Yep.
okay, well, now you've made a mistake. Here's a penalty, right? Whatever you want to see. So generally when I discipline a dog, it's not because I'm trying to create behavior. I'm trying to stop something. So just get that clear, right?
Yeah.
One is called non-compliance within 2 seconds.
This is what he's doing right now.
Yeah. So if you say come and a dog's like kind of wandering a little bit and it takes them like 5, 10, 20 seconds and then they turn to you to come, that's non-compliance.
Yeah. Okay.
So if I have a dog that's 100 meters away, and this has happened with Zeus, I have it on some video, like I call him and he immediately turns and he's on his way. It takes him about 20 seconds to get to me because he only has 3 legs. So it's not about how long it takes him to get to me. It's about
the turn.
The recall is that turn, right? So that's non-compliance. So I give my dogs 2 seconds to comply. Because there are some situations where even 2 seconds is too much. Especially if, let's say, I hit a ball, Ziva tries to grab it, she hits it with her nose because she has no front teeth. And I'm like, crap, the ball just is going to, I don't know, across the road. Or it's going to fall into the crocodile river. I don't know. And I'm like, she needs to... There can't be this like 5 seconds of whoop. Right, it's like 2 seconds. That's what you got. And recall to me is one of those, it's kind of like learning how to do like an emergency stop with no brakes, like handbrake and stuff like that. There are certain skills we really should learn, like first aid. That's what a recall is to me.
So how do you teach that?
Well, that's a question for another lesson.
Okay.
Because that's harder to just...
Okay.
The other one is disobedience. Disobedience is, let's say I'm recalling the dog, he's about halfway and he changes his mind. It's like, I'm just going to go there. That's disobedience, like, nah. Or he's like, I'm just going to run past you. Right? It's like, no. If I tell my dog to sit, let's say you do a sit stay, right? And the dog's like, I think 5 minutes is long enough. I'm going to get up and move over there. Put my butt there. No. Yeah. So disobedience and non-compliance, you need to understand it if you want to correct it. Because if you don't understand it and you're correcting it, that's not fair. Because you can't really explain it to the dog. Now, what I love about recall is most people will call their dog, like they'll play with them, away from shade when it's very hot. And then they go, why is my dog not recalling? I'm like, because you're an idiot. I mean, me and the dog will wait in shade.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a very rare recall. Like, let's say I see there's a snake in the shade and I'm like, you're coming. How would my dog know it's one of those? So that's one of those behaviors where I very rarely will practice it. Because it's one of those hard ones. Like, you don't do 1 rep max every training session, right? As far as I'm aware. Some people are silly enough to do that. Fine. I'm not judging them. Eventually it won't work. And then that's when the damage happens. So that's one of those really super difficult ones. Ziva's been snake avoidance trained. So if I call her, right, and she runs to me and she does this, then I know something's there. So I have to be very careful with her. But I can read her. I can see when she's changed her mind and when she's like, I'm just going to just alter the angle a bit. So you got to get to know your dog, right? So usually I'm like, there must be something there. I'm not going to look for it because that makes no sense.
Yeah.
What if someone dropped poison there?
Yeah.
What if there's a bear trap for a wino? Like, I think it's fair enough for dogs to avoid certain obstacles, you know, like falling down a cliff. I don't know. So sometimes we really have to make sure that we're reasonable. Ferret training. I learned this from a guy who trains ferrets. So if you call a ferret and there's something flying over, they stop because now it's about their safety. And if the recall doesn't keep them safe, they will never respond ever again. So that's why you first do temptation training. And then you need to do threat training. And threat training is about teaching you, so when do I not recall my dog? And that's a lesson in itself. And that's not a lesson that most people learn. They learn it the hard way, like I did. Luckily, Ziva nothing happened to her, but I had a heart attack. And I was like, oh my goodness. That's why I teach people, whenever we do recall, we still do the foundation. So we have a leave it, so you're not always recalling your dog. We have a recall, but we also have a, hey, we're changing direction.
Okay.
So I give people options because there is a time and a place for a recall. Okay.
Okay.